I think that's kind of where I'm at now, is that I kind of feel like if I felt all the things that I'm actually feeling and allowed myself to sit in that it would hurt. It feels weighty. And it feels like I don't have the space in my life. I've got 2 under 2 and we have got a lot going on right now. And so it just feels like, well, I don't have the time or the space to really like wade through that muck.
Balloons, bazookas, boobies, bosoms, boulders, cans, hooters, knockers, melons, honkers, jugs, rack, tatas, tits, torpedoes, guns, bust, doorknobs, coconuts, and our favorite one, the girls. Welcome to the All About Breastfeeding show, where your host, Lori, highlights mothers just like yourself and goes beyond the surface questions and digs deep so they share not only their joys and happiness in their daily breastfeeding life, but also their pain and struggles and how they worked through them.
Episode number 99. This is part 2 of Morgann's interview, and I am titling it, All Tongue Ties Are Not Created Equal. In today's show, Morgann is going to be talking about the birth of her second daughter and how she did find out very quickly that this new baby was also tongue-tied, and she talks about how this breastfeeding experience differed from her first. So let's get started. So tell me a little bit about your second babe. By that time you were already in Phoenix, right?
Yeah, so with my second baby, I carried a lot of anxiety going into our breastfeeding relationship because of how my first one started out. In my birth plan, which my birth plan was basically have a baby. That was it. But in my birth plan, I wrote, I want somebody to evaluate my daughter for tongue ties before we ever leave the birth center. I was not playing any games. I was not waiting any magic number of weeks. I just wanted to make sure everything was okay. And I knew at the very first latch after birth that she was tongue-tied. I remembered the feeling. I knew that it wasn't right. We had an evaluation done at the birth center. There was not an IBCLC present, but there was an experienced midwife, and she was able to refer us to a physician to have the revision done. So
it's always funny when I talk to moms who have had their first baby with tongue tie and they do have that anxiety going into it. The joke is like, I'm not asking anybody what I wanted the first time to check for 10 fingers and 10 toes. I'm asking someone, look and see if there's any ties.
It is funny. One of my, 4 or 5 days after I had her, one of my friends was like, she's perfect. 10 fingers and 10 toes, ? In a text. I knew she was tongue-tied. I knew that it was nothing to mess around with. And usually for the procedure, you can wait a while before you can actually get an appointment. And so I did call right away. I called on day 2. Earliest appointment they could offer me was 2.5 weeks out for the actual. That was not an option, but it was kind of my only option. It was the soonest I could be seen. And I was already in pain. I was already cracked and bleeding by probably day 3-ish, somewhere in there. I did pump a little bit, but the difference with this time around was that my daughter was not latching. She wasn't latching. She wasn't able to stay latched. It's like she didn't really know what to do with her mouth. The coordination just wasn't really there. And so it was actually almost more stressful the second time in that interim period before I could get the revision done. Because the first time around, all I had to do was deal with my discomfort as a mom. If I could get through, then we were fine. But the second time around, not only was I in excruciating pain, but my daughter wasn't gaining weight and she wasn't latching. And so we were doing almost like an SNS at the breast with a little, a syringe with a small little catheter in it to get her to try to latch on. And we ended up really spoon feeding for a lot of that and doing some syringe feeding as I would hand express or pump or whatever, just to get us through. And that was stressful when you've got a baby who's not gaining weight and you feel like as a mom that, this is my only responsibility right now. I'm the only one that can feed her and you're not. It's tough. It's really hard.
Yeah. So different baby, different problem.
Yeah.
So now you know why she's having a problem. But her response to breastfeeding was different than your first.
Absolutely. And I went to my pediatrician it was like a 10-day, it was a weight check. She had gained 1 ounce in the last 5 days, I think. And I knew, nobody had to tell me. I knew that wasn't enough. But my pediatrician is absolutely phenomenal and very big proponent of breastfeeding. She came back in the room with me and she's only gained 1 ounce, but I know you have the tongue tie revision scheduled. And so we're going to wait that out. She just looked at me and she said, "How are you doing?" And I lost it in her office and said, "This is awful. I feel like I've failed. I feel like, I'm not giving my daughter what she needs. She's not gaining weight." And she was so kind and listened and gave me tissues and told me it was going to be okay. And I remember she got up and she went to leave the room and she kind of walked out and then she came back, popped her head in and she looked at me and she goes, "Thank you for choosing to breastfeed your daughter even when it's really hard." I thought, I wish every provider would tell their mamas that they wouldn't overreact, to, especially when there's a tongue tie revision on the horizon. We know she's not gaining weight. She's not losing weight though. For her to reassure me that she was concerned, but that she felt like the plan that I had instituted was a good one, that she had confidence in me as a mom, was just like all that I needed.
That's wonderful because, being a doula and being around breastfeeding moms, I'm sure you could share a few stories about providers that are not as supportive.
Oh, yes.
And are, talking to moms about supplementing with formula at this point and pumping and, and I'm not saying any of that is wrong. Well, I shouldn't say that because sometimes the advice that mom is given is not what they want to hear,
sure.
But it is what they need. But I still think that breastfeeding moms really need to be told, thank you for keep trying to keep breastfeeding, and we're going to work on this and we're going to figure it out.
She was behind me and it was nice. And so I asked to be put on the wait list for the tongue tie revision. To my great surprise and relief, they ended up calling me and being able to bump my appointment up by almost 2 weeks. I ended up waiting much less than what I thought. The revision ended up being done when she was 10 days old.
Great.
And so that was pretty quick. We just had to make it, a week and a half and then had it done. And we got there and the doctor, kind of did an assessment. I had an assessment done the day before actually. And then he did an assessment for the actual revision appointment. And she has a, really tight lip tie, high palate, and she had a really tight tongue tie. But again, it was a different environment. It was a doctor's office, a pediatrician's office. And it was similar to my first experience in that I was met with smiles and people were not nervous or anxious about it. They were happy and they were encouraging and they were excited that they were going to be able to give me back a baby who was going to be able to, breastfeed well.
And they're going to be able to help you. Yes, it is exciting.
Yes, absolutely. And so even though the actual physical environment was different, the emotional environment was still there the second time around, where I had full confidence that they knew what they were doing and that they were going to do their absolute best to help us. And they did.
Thanks for sharing that because, I know I talked a lot about the environment before because, again, that birth junkie in me was just like, I just love all this. And it's great. Primarily, we need to know that we're walking into an office with people who want to be there, who looking like they want to do their jobs and they exude confidence and that they are excited to be able to use their skills to help you with breastfeeding.
Yes. And to feel, again, as a mother, to feel validated, even for them to use words like, there absolutely is a tongue tie here, or, we definitely can do something to try to fix this. Those sorts of things that for me, again, spoke. Really what that says is, I understand why you're having issues getting her to latch. I can see why this is painful, giving me peace of mind that we weren't broken, I wasn't broken, and that there was a fix for the issue that we were dealing with.
It's always so awful to me. I mean, you obviously have the right to use whatever words you want, and mothers do. But like as a consultant and as a peer mom, I always just cringe when I hear moms say, I feel like I failed and I felt broken, because I'm looking at you and other moms thinking you've done anything but fail.
Right.
And you're surely not broken. And look at what you've endured up to this point and how strong you are. You know, you're telling yourself all this negative emotion. So it always kind of makes me want to cry when I hear that.
I talk moms through this now as a doula, and helping them get resources that they need when they're in this situation. And I think about all the things, those same sorts of things I would tell another mom, you know, but it's different when it's me. That it doesn't really matter how much knowledge I have or how much I know what I should be telling myself or those sorts of things, that those emotions are still so real to feel like I failed or whatever, you know, fill in the blank. And I think we're always so hard on ourselves and so compassionate toward everybody else. So
yeah, and I realized a while ago that it's also quite common, because in my private practice on a regular basis, I see pediatricians, I see OBs, I see midwives, I see childbirth educators and doulas, and some, you know, still just may not even really know what's going on. But really what they're doing is telling them the same things. I need to be strong. I should know how to do this. I shouldn't have to ask for help. And, you know, and yet at the same time telling themselves they feel like they're failing and that they're broken. And when we have these discussions, we do talk about, like, you know, what would you have done if it was another mom that you were working with? And almost across the board, they'll say, well, I would have told her to get help a lot sooner.
Absolutely. That's my story for sure.
We just can't help ourselves. But the interesting thing is that I think we live, we learn, and then when we have experiences, we're then able to bring that, like you are doing, into your doula practice. And it's giving you another layer of compassion and empathy.
I'm so
and knowledge.
thankful. Yes. Yeah. So thankful for these experiences, because it does help you be able to relate. If you know, there's nothing, I mean, I'm so thankful for women who don't have, you know, hardships in breastfeeding, because I would wish that for everybody. But having been there and done that, and finding that this story is a much more common one than maybe what's told in the media, that it's nice to be able to say, I really understand, you know, as best as I can, and not being you, I understand.
When I work with a mom who it's a fairly easy fix, or she just contacts me afterwards because I saw her prenatally, and she just, you know, tells me, check, all the things that breastfeeding is going wonderfully and beautifully. I'm not really saying it to them, but I am saying it to myself, just like some words of thanks, because I know that when breastfeeding is going really well for her, that she's going to be a tired, exhausted, sleep-deprived new mommy. But if she has good support, that there's so many other things that she's going to be able to enjoy from her postpartum period, that pain and anxiety and worry about things related to breastfeeding are not going to enter her picture. That takes this huge shift, and you're able to enjoy your postpartum period in a very different way than moms who are suffering with breastfeeding. So I am like, ka-ching! Going really well. And maybe she has just a few general questions. I mean, that stuff is normal to have, but overall, for it to be going really well, I'm incredibly happy and thrilled for her baby. And most importantly, I just think to myself, wow, she's going to have a great postpartum period. Anything else you wanted to add about second baby and getting revised? What was it like after that?
It was a little bit, everything is different. You think you've got it in the bag after you've had one, and then you have a second and you realize that you don't. But it was definitely different. With my first, she just like knew what to do after the revision, and things kind of just self-corrected, and it was fine. With my second, it's like she had to relearn how to use her tongue, and she never really learned to use it in the first place because it wasn't able to do what it needed to do. We were still doing a lot of syringe feeding, that sort of thing, just kind of getting by until the revision. And so after, she required a lot more at-home therapy and those sorts of things to teach her what this muscle was in her mouth that now had all of this mobility that she did not have before. That's the time that 3 days after the revision, we went and saw you, Lori, because we still it felt a little pinchy to me still while we were latching, and she's still just like kind of wasn't totally sure what to do. And so she just required more coaching post revision. But gosh, it didn't take more than probably 3 or 4 days before she kind of found her new groove, and breastfeeding started to become a lot more enjoyable for us.
It's funny because, well, a couple of things. Interestingly enough, you had 2 very different experiences. You had babies with ties, and these are other things that I'd love for moms who are listening to understand, that I frequently say all ties are not created equally.
Yes.
And so if you were to just have your first babe and that's your experience, like all this hardship leading up to it, then you're one of these moms who, and I got the tongue revised and everything was beautiful. And then that's what we portray to the public. And it's not that I'm thrilled that you had issues with your second, but having that different perspective, again, just really broadens your experience and makes you, I don't want to say more compassionate, but to really understand why moms might still have some difficulties. Because if you were to just have your one experience, like, oh yeah, I had a baby who was tongue-tied, but after I got the procedure, everything was beautiful.
Right.
Well, that wasn't your experience with your second baby. So now you've added another quite a few layers of knowledge and understanding, and saying, well, okay, so my second was tied, but there were other things going on. And the fix wasn't like at that moment, there was still some other work to do. And you were able to get to that point sooner, more than likely, because you now know what it's supposed to feel like.
Yes.
And when it wasn't feeling like that with her, it motivated you to get help sooner rather than later or not at all. And those are one of the things that I struggle with moms that I work with, that the procedure isn't just this cure-all and doesn't fix it all. For some, it certainly does, but others that it doesn't. I'm talking to moms who are still struggling 2 and 3 and 5 days later. There's other work to be done. And there's that thing that we want to think, that magical procedure, and then everything should be okay. And sometimes it is, and sometimes it isn't.
And for me, the other work that needed to be done was still relatively simple fixes. It was just positioning her head a little differently, or holding my breast a little differently, or those sorts of things that, it was new muscle memory that I had to create for me, because it was different than I, had been breastfeeding.
Right.
But it was still an easier fix, certainly easier than dealing with the pinching pain that went away as soon as we held, everything like it should have been held, those sorts of things. And so it's just those fine tuning things. But when it's something that you're doing all day, every day for, years at a time, those fine tuning things really can make all the difference.
Yeah. So is she almost 2 months old?
She'll be 7 weeks old tomorrow. And
so you are still what I consider still like fresh in this postpartum phase. And so,
yes.
So you could really speak from the heart from someone who's like right there in the thick of it. So what's something that you're going through now postpartum that you would like other mothers to know about, and what words of wisdom do you have for them?
I was thinking, what would I wanted to tell myself? And then I rephrased it and said, no, what do I need to be told? Because that's where I am now.
That's really good, Morgann.
Yeah. I don't know if I'll get through this without crying, but moms need to know that you are an amazing mom, that you're doing the hard work, and that you're the perfect mom for your baby, that there's nobody else out there who would be a better mom than you are, that you're enough. And I think wanting to be told that, even though I know those things, that if somebody were to just grab my shoulder and look me in the eye and say, you're doing it, you're enough, that I want to hear those words, and I want to believe them and live them out. I think the second thing that I'd want to be told is it's going to be okay. Whatever's not okay right now is going to be okay. If it's because you're exhausted today and you need sleep, it's going to be okay. You're going to get sleep. If it's because nursing is so painful right now, then do the next best thing, make the next best phone call, but it's going to be okay. If it's because you're struggling with depression or anxiety in these postpartum weeks, like, it's going to be okay. And if it's not okay right now, it's because it's not the end, because in the end, it will be okay. And the flip side of that point is that if you're not okay, then it's okay to ask for help. and it's okay to not be okay. And I think sometimes we have these glorified versions of what, or especially the early postpartum days, are supposed to be like, and they're not like that a lot of the time. And we're supposed to, we have this bundle of joy that we've anticipated for 9 months on end, and sometimes more for some people, if you tried for a long time before that or whatever. And then you get handed this baby and you don't know who they are, and you're learning them and they're learning you. And it can be really, really hard sometimes. And it's okay that it's hard. Just because something is normal and natural doesn't mean it's going to be easy. And so just because it's hard doesn't mean that something's wrong necessarily. And it's okay to ask for help in those moments to get through. And I think sometimes as moms, we're so hard on ourselves. Like we just, we got to juggle all these balls and we have to do all these things, and our life has to be perfect so we can post pictures on Instagram or whatever it is. And then we're really just falling apart, and we're really just all trying to grasp for something, reassure us that it's going to be okay, and that it's okay that today's a hard day and tomorrow might be a hard day too, but did those hard days together, it wouldn't be as hard,
If you were to pick up the phone, because we talk about asking for help, and I think it's still this thing in moms' minds, like, okay, so I'm told I could ask for help, but what does that mean? What do I do? And how do I ask? So if you were to pick up the phone now and ask for help, who would you call and what would you say?
I would probably call my doula, who is kind of also my boss, because she walked with me through pregnancy and birth and has walked with me through this postpartum period, which for us has been really challenging for so many different reasons. And I would say that I feel overwhelmed most of the time and that it's really hard right now. I don't know that there's necessarily a fix right now, but to just have somebody in my corner and to not forget about me and to know that it's hard and that some days are really a struggle. I think just having somebody know.
Being able to get those words out, get it off your chest, and have someone that that cares about you listen to what you're saying.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I'm not looking for a fix, most of the time. And most things don't necessarily need to be fixed as much as they need to be lived out. To just not be alone in that, and to have somebody to say, how are you doing? And be willing to listen to the full answer and not the I'm fine answer is not really kind of
you on the back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a relief.
You brought up a couple of really excellent points that I think social media has just brought another level to the whole thinking that everything needs to be perfect postpartum, the smiling faces and everything perfect in the household. And we're always happy all the time, and what we project to the world, because now we just see all those pictures on Facebook and Instagram. And yet, as mothers postpartum, and I work with moms all the time, none of that has changed. We're all still feeling, well, maybe I'm stereotyping a little too much, but many of us are still feeling upset about that. We feel like we're not good enough. We're frustrated. We feel anxious. We have the hormones that are trying to straighten themselves out. Maybe things aren't going well with breastfeeding, and maybe they are going well with breastfeeding, but there's just stuff. There's like stuff that happens behind closed doors. But when we get on the outside of the door, we feel the need to project something very different, because to do anything different is to make ourselves vulnerable. Mm-hmm. Make ourselves vulnerable is really scary.
I think that's kind of where I'm at now, is that I kind of feel like if I felt all the things that I'm actually feeling and allowed myself to sit in that it would hurt. It feels weighty. And it feels like I don't have the space in my life. I've got 2 under 2, and we have got a lot going on right now. And so it just feels like, well, I don't have the time or the space to really wade through that muck,
You can't take a weekend off, right?
No, it doesn't work like that.
Yeah. And I still encourage you to do that, because I think here's me telling you what to do. Because I still think that you need to not be afraid, and you need to do that. And I'm sure your husband will be willing to help you, or maybe just going out with your doula, maybe just having time to yourself and allow you to have that big, ugly, hot mess cry for more than 2 minutes, then quickly wipe your tears because a kiddo needs you. As long as you need to, with 20 minutes, that heaving, crying, then your throat is sore and your eyes are swelled red. And that's a good beginning for you to just really do it, feel it, and go through those emotions will maybe be a good start for you, because I think you do need to let some of that out.
I think so too. My doula actually, she called me yesterday, but I couldn't talk at the time, and called her back, but she couldn't talk at the time. And so we have somewhere in the near future time to talk through some of that, which is good.
And you know that you'll be safe with her, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Morgann, thank you so much for being vulnerable with us here on the air, because I know people are going to be listening to this.
Yeah.
And it's a hard thing to do. I just know that this conversation is going to help so many mothers in many different ways with motherhood, how we feel postpartum. You're experiencing both of your experiences with breastfeeding and how both of them differed. There are just so many layers to our conversation. And here's what I know, because I get emails all the time, that I want you to know that you have achieved the goal of letting mothers know some important things. You have no idea how far and how wide this reaches of podcasting, of shows, and how, your voice is going to be in women's heads. They're going to hear you go through all of these emotions, and it is going to be incredibly helpful to thousands of women, literally. So
I'm so excited. And, my hope would be that the women, especially who are listening, that you've got your own kind of tribe that you can talk to or be a sounding board. If not, then, I welcome and extend that invitation to dialogue over email or whatever. And I'm doing it for the second time, but in some ways it feels like the first time all over again, because it is different. It's a different baby, and I'm in a different place. And emotionally, this postpartum period has been so much more difficult than with my first. I'm in that now, trying to figure that out. And I think sometimes it's good and helpful even to talk to people who you don't know, because it feels safe. They don't know anybody who and it's not going to go anywhere.
And you can be of value to someone else and yourself, even though you're in the thick of it yourself.
Yes, absolutely. And sometimes I think talking to somebody else about that person, giving advice to other people is such an encouragement to my spirit, even because as I speak words of truth to other people, I'm really speaking them to myself too. And sometimes that's kind of the route we have to take when it's hard to talk ourselves through it.
I know that's what works for me sometimes. Have you heard that Phoenix, Arizona is blessed with an amazing birthing center? Baby Moon Inn Birth Center is the best option for families who want access to midwifery care in and out of a hospital setting. You can experience birth in a comfortable home-like setting where natural birth is the focus. Laboring in water, being able to walk outside during labor, and enjoy the beautiful garden. This is what birth can be like for you. There is so much more to learn about Baby Moon. The staff would love to have the opportunity to meet you and would like to extend an invitation for you to attend a free Choices in Childbirth class and a tour of the birth center. All you need to do is call 602-314-7755. That's 602-314-7755 and ask for the tour dates. You can also go to allaboutbreastfeeding.biz/podcast. And on the right-hand side of the page, you will see a link that will bring you to the calendar, and you can sign up for the tour yourself. When you come in for the tour, make sure that you tell them you found out about it from the All About Breastfeeding podcast, and you will be given a very lovely free gift. Now, back to the show. I know that you work at one of my favorite birthing centers here in Phoenix. I'd love if you're willing to share a little bit about your work as a doula and
Yes.
the birth center that you work at, and how you kind of came to do all that and how you feel about your work.
Just one second. My little nursing baby needs to nurse. So I'm going to grab her really quick.
What's her name?
Everly. Hey, little one. Sorry.
Okay.
Go.
How big is Everly now? What does she weigh?
I think she's about 10 pounds. Not really sure.
Little chunker.
Yeah. Okay. I am not currently actively working as a doula as I'm at home with my littles, but I do work with Baby Moon Inn here in Phoenix as a doula. We play a neat role. Sometimes I work in a collective. We share an on-call schedule, and I do a couple different things. One of the things is that women outside of the birth center, anybody in the area can hire the Baby Moon Inn doulas to be their doula wherever they're choosing to deliver, home or hospital, birth center. And we, meet with them beforehand. And then they also, as a part of that, get the prenatal class series that Baby Moon offers, which is kind of a fun perk. The classes are really great. But then primarily, at least when I was working, what we were doing is Baby Moon has a planned hospital birth program. So women who want midwifery care, who, really want that, just the longer prenatal appointments and really getting to know their care providers and that sort of things, they can do their prenatal care at Baby Moon. Our midwives has privileges to deliver at St. Joe's. They can get that prenatal care experience, but then choose to deliver at the hospital. And women do that for a variety of different reasons. Sometimes it's just what their comfort zone is. Other times it's because they've risked out of hospital birth for one reason or another. That midwife will oversee care of twins with a supervising physician, that sort of thing. Kind of a neat thing. And all of those mamas who are planned hospital births they get a doula at the hospital with them for that time. And then the second thing that we do is any of our mamas who start out as birth center clients who risk out of birth center care, or either during their prenatal time for like elevated blood pressure or just different things like that, or during labor if they have elevated blood pressures or poor fetal heart tones or whatever that could risk them out of delivering out of hospital and they get transferred. All of those mamas also will get one of the doulas. And so I was serving primarily in that function, getting to support women who were transferred care to the hospital.
That's fabulous. Years ago, when I first became a childbirth educator and I opened up my own practice teaching moms in my home, moms who were giving birth at home, birthing center, hospital, I titled my course Choices in Childbirth. Mm-hmm. And this depicts it perfectly because, birth is very different for all of us. But one of the things that I'm a firm believer in is that women should be given choices and options and be allowed to make the choices that they feel most comfortable with. So it doesn't matter if I would like to birth with a midwife, if I would like to birth at a birthing center or at a home or in water or in a hospital, but just that I have the choice to do what I feel that I'm most comfortable with and is the best interest of my family. And I love this collective of doulas and the relationship that Baby Moon has with the hospital, that women can get really excellent care and give birth in the environment in which they're most comfortable with. Or, maybe they really wanted to birth at the birth center and that is where they're most comfortable with, but circumstances, medical issues come up and they get to go to the hospital that has a really good relationship with the birthing center and the midwife. And I've spoken to enough moms who there's some disappointment, of course, one can understand that. However, their sentiments and what they usually verbalize is that it's almost as if I were at the birthing center.
We try to communicate, and the environment we try to create is it's always a Baby Moon birth, but sometimes the location changes. Sometimes they get their Baby Moon birth at the birth center. Sometimes it's at the hospital, but the goal is that, that their support team, their midwife, because it's a Baby Moon midwife, even at the hospital, that their support team knows them and knows their wishes, and that we're going to do everything we can to help them create the birth that they want. And you can get that even if you're not in the hospital. There's beautiful, beautiful births that I've gotten to the honor to be a part of and to support women, and that they're in a hospital bed, or they're standing by the hospital bed, or they're on the toilet in the hospital bathroom. And, they've got lavender going in their diffuser and their favorite music playing on their phone or whatever it is. But getting to see them, see that they can be empowered even in a setting that they might not have planned on, is really an honor and a joy to be a part of.
Yeah. And, it's always interesting. I always kid with the midwives and about that we could even plan a home birth or a birthing center birth. And sometimes it still doesn't happen the way, we plan on being in the tub.
Totally.
Lights, and like you said, the lavender oil.
My first was going to be a water birth, and I still have yet to have a water birth 2 kids later.
See, that's the thing is like, it's still, frequently it just isn't whatever we spend time, 9 months fantasizing about, and it's all good. But my point is sometimes it's not exactly the way we fantasize, and it can still all be really good.
Yes, absolutely.
So you're in new mommy mode, you're postpartum. Do you have any idea how long you're going to take off from your doula work that I know you love?
I don't know. I'd love to get back at it, if I could tomorrow, but that's just not wise. And it's not what my body needs. And if I would have told myself this last time around, I wouldn't have believed it. But I love these early nursing days of, just cuddling and even just making eye contact with her and those sorts of things. It's such a special time. And
you can't get it back, and you can't do that stuff when you're rushing off to birth. So
and I really feel like right now where I'm supposed to be is at home with my 2 little girls. And I think probably somewhere down the road that, I might be able to add something else to it, but I can pick up doula work anytime, anywhere. And I'm, like you said, I'm never going to get these days back. And right now I'm not willing to give those up. So,
I'm glad you're saying that too, that we're talking a little bit about this also, because I find that there's such a rush for moms to get back to work, whether it's for financial reasons or personal reasons. And I think especially if there's no financial reasons, I talk to women about not being such a rush, that whatever it is that you want to do, the world is outside your front door and you get back to it. And if you don't need to financially, if you're not pushed into doing it, give yourself all the time you need. Weeks and weeks, months and months. I mean, my hope is that moms take off many months to be able to recover from pregnancy, from birth, and get into the groove, get to know your baby, learn about your baby. You have a family, and you have tons going on at home. The rest of the world can wait.
Yep, I agree.
Wonderful. So one of the other things that you had mentioned is that you're open to moms getting in touch with you. So which preferred way, if someone were to touch base with you, because I also don't want to overwhelm you.
Sure.
But what is the best way for a mom to get in touch with you if they felt a connection with you and just kind of wanted to chat with you?
Sure. Go ahead and shoot me an email at doulamorgann@gmail.com. So that's DOULAMORGANN @gmail.com. And you're just likely to get more of a well thought out response that way versus on the phone or something, because who knows what'll be going on if my phone goes off. But emails, I'm more intentional about sitting down and, writing or reading through them. So I think that's probably the best way. And then we can just go from there.
Wonderful. Oh, you know what? I forgot one thing. Are you willing to share how we met?
Of course. Yes.
This is a fun story.
It is a fun story. So when I moved here to Phoenix, I was not actively practicing as a doula, mainly because I was new to the area and I needed to kind of find the lay of the land and figure out what hospitals are what and what providers are what. So I was on a couple of Facebook groups to help learn some of that information. And Lori's name was one name that I saw frequently come up when doulas or whoever would ask about lactation IBCLCs in the area. And so I'd seen her name come up on Facebook groups. I hadn't ever met her, but everything I'd ever seen was that she was really helpful and had, great strategies for helping women with breastfeeding. So I don't know why, I just had that in the back of my mind. Well, shortly after I moved here, one of my very first friends I made had a baby. she had some really big struggles with breastfeeding early on and her son gaining weight and all of that. And she kind of told me about him. And I said, why don't you see a lactation consultant? And she didn't know where to start. So I threw Lori's name out. She scheduled a home visit with Lori. I offered to my friend if she was just in a really rough place. And so I had offered, if you would like me to be there during that home visit, I'm happy to be there as a second set of ears to listen and do those sorts of things. And so I packed up I think I had like a 9-month-old at the time, my oldest, and threw her on my back in my carrier and walked over to my friend's apartment, and Lori was there. And so we met and I just listened for most of it. But then the time came for Lori to kind of diagnose the issue, whether it was a supply issue from mom or if the issue was babies, mouth not transferring milk correctly, those sorts of things. And so Lori was bold enough to ask if the two of us moms felt comfortable with me actually nursing this other mom's new baby to see if maybe he would remove milk from me, knowing that my supply was good. I had been breastfeeding for 9 months, those sorts of things. And so we kind of looked at each other and shrugged shoulders. And I was like, I mean, I'm in if you're in. And she was like, whatever, I'm desperate at this point to find out what's going on. And so we did. So I nursed her baby and we were able to help diagnose what was going on. And I hung around after that, and Lori finished her visit and left. And it was just kind of a funny thing. It was cool to be able to have a pretty unique experience, especially with a friend who at the time I really had known for like 2 or 3 weeks. And Lori and I didn't meet again until I scheduled to see her for my second daughter after the tongue tie revision.
Yeah, so it was funny because I get excited at some of the weirdest things, right?
Yes, and I do too.
And I always call it like my breastfeeding lab because I don't usually have that set up. And when I'm trying to really show a mom what I think is going on, I'm able to, like when I have my little breastfeeding lab, as I call it, that I'm able to really prove to her. And she was willing and you were willing. And the funniest thing with you, Morgann, is that you fed her baby and you were like, your eyes lit up. Like you were like,
so cool.
I mean, the whole time I was watching you juggle, on your hip and whatever, this chunky, cute little girl. And then I asked you and you're like, well, sure. And then your eyes lit up and you're like, oh my goodness, this is like a newborn.
Yes, it was so neat for me because, like I had said, up to that point, my experience breastfeeding a newborn was so painful. And, all I had known was those first 6 weeks of excruciating pain and cracked and bleeding nipples and that whole thing. And then I nursed her baby who didn't have any ties, whose mouth was working perfectly, who was transferring milk fine. And it was like relaxing and gentle and all of these things that my breastfeeding journey wasn't the first time around. And so it was neat just because it was a cool experience. But for me, it was such an encouragement, like, oh my goodness, well, if this is what it's supposed to be like to breastfeed a newborn, then I can do this again, And it also, again, kind of made me go, wow, I was really strong
yes.
with that first baby, because this is so not what that was like for me. And it was really encouraging for me.
Yeah, it was really beautiful. And to me, it even though I work with this all the time, I just love confirming things again and again and again and again. And,
yes.
It was just very confirming to me, but I could really see with you. And that's when I was finding out the struggles that you had. And so what I really want mothers to know is if it is hurting, if you're sore, if you're cracked, if you're bleeding, if your baby's spending long times at the breast and still not getting good feeding, it's really not supposed to be that way. And it's like this huge red flag that something is wrong. And when you did that, Morgann, coming from a mom who had a hard time, but knows what it's supposed to feel like, but really didn't get that in the newborn stage, and now is holding this baby of, less than a week or two old, and your eyes lighting up and you're like, wow, this is what it's supposed to be like. It was just like the coolest thing. So like I said initially, like when I left that consult, my heart was singing. I was like, I just have a lot of really good days with breastfeeding. So, but I'm like, this is like the best day ever. And then when I met you and you walked in, the thing is, when you made the appointment, it didn't stick with me because I don't remember your name. And then it was partway through, we're like, oh, that's right. And then
I don't know if you remember, but you and I actually emailed back and forth a little bit after you had come and helped my friend. I think I emailed you because I was so impressed with how you dealt with her and the experience that you gave me. I was just so encouraged by all of that. I remember emailing you and just being like, just thanking you for your work that you do and for caring for new moms, and that we emailed back and forth a little bit. And that was that. And then I knew exactly who you were when I made the appointment, obviously. But yeah, how do I bring this up and tell her that she actually doesn't, maybe it's just me, maybe she forgot who I am. I don't know. But
yeah, it was sweet in many different ways. So You're fabulous. You were fabulous then, you're fabulous now.
Thank you.
And I know we took a long time. We got a lot of stuff. This is definitely going to be one of those 2-part shows. So everybody prepare for that. And people love the 2-part shows. That's
awesome.
It's really great. So I thank you so much. I know we're recording this on a Saturday morning. You got kids and family and stuff to do, and you've given me a lot of your time. So I really appreciate you, Morgann.
Absolutely. It was a joy. Thank you for having me.
You are welcome. For anyone who has had a baby and struggled, you know that this time period can be very hard. And you also know that it can be really hard to speak your truth about your postpartum period. Just as Morgann said, so many of us think that we're supposed to project to the rest of the world that we're fine. People ask you how you're doing, and you say with a big smile, I'm fine, even when you're not. And sometimes you tell people, I'm doing great. Things are really great. And you know what? If you're not doing great, and if you're not fine, and you're telling others that you're fine, you're using a lot of energy pretending to the world and almost making things worse for yourself. Morgann is speaking to us during her 4th trimester and very much in this delicate postpartum period. She is honest with her feelings, and I'm grateful for the strength that she showed to talk truthfully and honestly about her experience. I know that there are many listeners who, right now, are feeling the same way, and you're taking in her words of wisdom. You may not be in the best place emotionally, and you're listening to the interview and thinking, well, Morgann has a lot of experience with birth as a doula and breastfeeding, mom of 2 babies, and she counsels other moms as her work as a doula. And if she could be feeling the way she is and have the strength to reach out for help, well, maybe I can too. We both encourage you to pick up the phone and call someone you know who cares about you. If you're not living close to loved ones who are not able to help you day to day, call your care provider. Ask someone for help. Tell someone that you are feeling overwhelmed. It will help you get better. On another note, next week is a very special week, as it is my 100th show. You will definitely want to be here for this special show, as I'm going to go down memory lane as I look back on my podcasting journey and some of the guests I've interviewed. I will also be filling you in on what to expect for this upcoming season 2 of All About Breastfeeding. And the best part, I will be giving away some really cool prizes, so you will not want to miss this show. Until the 100th show, bye-bye.